So I just want to introduce you to Viva, explain a bit about who we are, where we're coming from, and what we hope to give to you as ACCA students. Our mission, essentially, is to deliver elite online tuition without the premium price tag. And we have hit upon a formula, a model that allows us to do that. So we have been in operation for 7 years now, and we have been delivering premium tuition in the ACCA space. We are an award-winning online accountancy tuition provider. We've helped over 10,000 students pass their exams. We have an average 4.8 out of 5 student satisfaction rating on Trustpilot. And Trustpilot is one of these third-party review platforms. It's one of the world's most reputable and largest review platforms for companies, both online and offline. Anyone can go to Trustpilot, set up an account and leave a review of any company that they want. So it's a third-party platform. We don't have any control over what students write there or what ratings they give us. But that is one of the highest ratings that you can get on Trustpilot, obviously 4.8 out of 5. It's quite uncommon that you would see such high ratings. And that is, we believe, a testament to the quality of our elite tuition, our premium online tuition. We've World Prize winning students at every level. We have produced World Prize winning students at every level in our ACCA tuition. We are a registered tuition provider with ACCA, and we have achieved the Global Pass Rate Excellence Award in 2020 with ACCA as well. And the exciting news for you as an ACCA student is that we are bringing this model to the ACCA space in 2023. So throughout 2023, we're going to be launching our online premium ACCA courses, again, delivering that elite tuition at a fraction of the cost of traditional providers. And in March this month, by the end of this month, you will see advanced audit and assurance, and law going live on Viva's website. And then throughout April and May, you're going to see 4 to 5 more ACCA subjects or online courses going live for those subjects as well. So an exciting time for you as an ACCA student and as a prospective or current member of our mailing list. If you're not already a member of our mailing list, I'm going to add a link in the chat after this little presentation where you can join our mailing list. You'll get early bird offers on all of our online courses, but you'll also receive free access to a 64-page ACCA subject by subject pass guide, which we have prepared for you. So the idea basically in the long term is to bring our ACCA, or our ACCA model, I should say, to the ACCA space. And we have our famous all access subscription in the ACCA area. And we're going to look to bring this to the ACCA space. So as we roll out more and more courses, we will start to offer this all access subscription. It's just knockout value, just incredible value for premium online tuition compared to the traditional providers. So as I mentioned just briefly there a moment ago, we also have this 64-page ACCA subject by subject pass guide. This is a downloadable PDF ebook essentially, and you will get free access to this if you sign up to our mailing list, which I highly recommend. Very simple process, just enter your name and your email and tick the boxes asking for your permission to join our mailing list. And this is a really, really great guide. It's got lots of useful free materials. It's got advice from ACCA prize winners and advice from examiners and useful tips and tricks when you're preparing for your exams and structure of the exams, the average pass rates and everything like that. So it's really, really useful thing to have. And just to kind of go back to the point about our rating on Trustpilot, this is just to underline how unusual it is that we have a rating of 4.8 out of 5. You can see here there's a category performance comparison within the Trustpilot dashboard. We're categorized in Trustpilot system as a career and education provider. And you can see the average for that category is 3.7 out of 5. And we are all the way up at 4.8 out of 5. That's our latest Trustpilot score. So that just gives you an indication of the premium quality. And a lot of our reviews, you get these kind of recurring themes. You can see that students are really impressed by how personalized a lot of the tuition is, the live webinars, the feedback they get, the quality of the on-demand content and the on-demand video lessons and lectures, the downloadable notes, and just that personal touch as well, which is something we take pride in. We're hoping to replicate that in the ACCA space. So I just added a couple of examples from our Trustpilot reviews here. And you can always look back here with this. We're going to record this session, so you'll be able to go back afterwards if you want to have a look at these reviews in more detail in the recording of this session. Okay, so I am going to stop now. That's my very brief introduction to Viva. You may already be on our mailing list, but as I said, if you're not on our mailing list already, I'm just going to add the link in the chat box. Okay, so you can open up the chat box, and I'm now adding a link where you can subscribe for free to our mailing list if you haven't already. And you will receive that free subject by subject pass guide when you sign up. Okay, so that's now been added to the chat box. So without further ado, I'm now going to introduce our speaker, our wonderful speaker for this evening's session, and that is Paul Russell. And Paul Russell is vastly experienced in the area of accountancy tuition, a real all-star tutor, and we're delighted to have him with us here on this session. So I'm going to stop talking, I'm going to step back, and I'm going to hand over to Paul.
Okay, I hope that I live up to that excellent introduction. Hugo, thank you for inviting me. And listen, everybody, thank you for joining us and indeed me today. I have a question for you in relation to our topic area for today. And it's a question that I think you should be able to answer pretty easily. And my question is this: is the introduction of the professional skills by the ACCA in September 22, or if you want to go back to the SBL exam in September 18, is it something that is really, really stressing out students, ACCA students, and indeed, do you think some tutors or lecturers? Any thoughts? Yes or no? Is this something that is really, really worrying students, tutors, lecturers? Anyone pipe in on the chat? Because I've got an answer for that. Any thoughts, anyone? Ideas? I can tell you, in my experience and from listening to students over the last few months, and indeed when the SBL went live in September 2018, in other words, the first time that professional skills were actually brought in a significant way to the ACCA qualification, this is something that is causing certainly some students and certainly some lecturers a lot of problems. And for me, when you go through this ACCA journey, you're trying to get qualified. You're trying to get qualified as quickly as possible. For me, one of the missing links, or if you will, a mindset that you can use, that I would use, that I did use, that I think is very, very useful, is this idea of proper tactics. In other words, proper tactics in your studies, proper tactics in your exam technique, and proper tactics on the day of the exam itself. Now, what I mean by that is that, in essence, if we're trying to get a firm fix on professional skills, and indeed how professional skills are going to affect you, let's say in the options paper, one thing that you've got to do, or I think the first thing that you've got to do, is you've got to understand your enemy. In other words, you've got to understand, why have the ACCA made such a significant move in the course of the last 6 months, i.e. in particular, since September 22. Why have they done this? You've got to understand why they've done it. And by understanding why they have done it, in other words, the source of this big change, the source of this new challenge for ACCA students at the strategic professional level, that's going to get you part of the way to actually dealing with this whole area of professional skills. Okay. Now, what I mean exactly will become clearer when I share some material with you today, because I've got a fair amount of material for you. And we're going to start with what you might call a straightforward look at professional skills, the background broadly since September 18, and indeed what you're facing right now. In other words, you could call it our plan A. In other words, I'm going to assume no knowledge at all in relation to professional skills. And I'm going to take you through what this area means to you, what it means to me, and what it's going to mean to us within the exams itself. Okay, so you might call that our Plan A. And that is going to be introduced to you in the form of a mind map. Okay, now this mind map is available for download within 24 hours of this webinar. So you'll be able to get a copy of this mind map to assist you going forward. So there you have it. There's our Plan A. Now, outside of a Plan A, just going back to my point about this ACCA journey and tactics. In other words, tactics for getting through this ACCA qualification as quickly as you can. What I have for you on top of our Plan A is a Plan B and a Plan C. So actually, I've got three things, fairly straightforward things to talk to you about tonight. And we're going to finish off at the end of our webinar today with a short Q&A as well. So as Hugo said, if you do have questions, either put them in on the chat box or write them down. Okay. So in essence, what I want you to remember from this intro, is number one, I'm going to take you through in the main for about 20 minutes, the nuts and bolts, the sort of A to Z of professional skills in the ACCA exam. That's our Plan A. Okay. And then I'm going to take you through two other plans. And it's important for you to keep an open mind, because I would suggest to you that some of what you're going to hear tonight, indeed today, is stuff that maybe you didn't expect, and maybe it might be a little bit unusual, a little bit quirky, but I'm hoping that that quirkiness is going to stick with you, okay? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to screen share with you and show you my mind map for tonight and walk you through our Plan A. If you bear with me 1 second, and I will just put up our mind map. There you have it. I'm hoping that you can see that okay. Let me just move that for you. Now, as I said, this particular mind map is going to be available for download. So you will be able to get a copy of this, okay? So we're going to start off up top on the right, okay? Now, what you'll see here on the right is basically what I've referred to as the inside track. Now, remember what I said, I'm assuming zero knowledge of professional skills today. So we're going from the ground up. So if you've already sat an option paper, if you think you have a fix on things, then just bear with us, because there may be some students online or watching the recording that don't, okay? Maybe there are some students that haven't sat a strategic professional paper yet and are really not sure what professional skills are. So remember, we're going from the ground up. So let's talk about this inside track. Why are we here today? Why are you having to deal with this additional challenge over and above all the technical content? God, haven't you got enough to deal with without the ACCA muddying the waters and bringing in something else you to deal with? Why are we here? Let's kick off. Key points for me. Now, this takes us back, if you will, to September 2018. And that is when the SBL exam, the Strategic Business Leader, was introduced. Now, that's the first time that significant professional marks were seen within an exam. And when I say significant, I'm talking about more than a few, So outside of that, what was the origins to this? As you're probably aware, if you've done a little bit of research, all the changes from the SBL onwards have really been driven by consultations with employers. It's about external pressure. It's about trying to make the ACCA exams more real life, like you experience out there in the big bad world. So September 22, we know that really we had the introduction of the first three, with ATX to come June 23. In essence, what we're talking about is a significant shift between technical marks and indeed professional marks across the options papers, okay? Now, when we talk about skills, I will, towards the end of this particular mind map, give you a feel for each of the main skills and how I see them. But let's note that from September 2018, where the skills area was introduced, we're talking about a slight shift within the options papers. In other words, similar, but one or two differences between the skills tested within SBL and that have been tested since September 18, and the skills that are being tested now and indeed will be, in particular, with the ATX exam in June 23. So there's the sort of rough background, okay? Now, in terms of the main changes, as you're probably aware, we're talking about 20% versus 80% technical, 80 professional skills marks, 20% across the four main options papers with, as mentioned, ATX to come in June 23. Now, in terms of how that's going to pitch itself within each of the sections, A and B are going to be split down. Let me just move this to the right so you can see it properly. You'll see that in section AQ1, we're going to have 10, and in B, we're going to be split really 50-50, 5 and 5, question 2 and question 3. Now, one of the things that I've heard, and this is horrifying, from students, both online and indeed just interacting with students, is that some students have the view that one tactic that they could employ, given the breakdown that you see on screen, is to broadly ignore this area of professional skills and to try to get a pass mark, i.e. 50%, out of the 80 technical marks, okay? Now, if you do your maths, it's not difficult to establish that's a massive challenge. This whole area of professional skills is not something that can be avoided. It can't be sidestepped. And any student that thinks, oh no, well, I'll just study much harder and be more familiar with the content and I should be okay, they're on an extremely sticky wicket. These marks are important and we have to understand what the ACCA mean by them. You can't ignore them. And to be honest with you, as we'll see a little bit later on in this webinar, it's not actually going to be as problematic as you may think it will be, particularly because today we have three plans. We've got plan A, we've got plan B, and we've got plan C, okay? So there's the basic setup. Much of that I'm sure you will have already known. Let's move on to our next section here. Now, in terms of the changes, I sort of mentioned this already. We know that basically all of the changes, bar ATX, are already effectively in play. Now, one thing to be careful about, depending upon the order of your papers, is certainly, if you're in a position where you're facing a resit or you have the misfortune of the resit, just be careful the order in which you take papers. For my money, in my opinion, in terms of the easiest route towards the options papers, it's the most straightforward route. And what I mean by that is I'm inclined for students to actually sit the SBL paper first, because I think it's very, very manageable with reasonable technical knowledge, not perfect, but in particular with very, very good examination technique. Now, just very briefly, this webinar isn't about SBL, but let me give you a little bit of a hint on how to pass that paper if you were to take my advice and sit SBL first before you go near any options papers. In other words, getting SBL passed and attacking those professional skill marks first. I think that's going to build confidence towards the options papers. Very briefly on SBL, I can tell you what I think the difference on SBL is between a passing student and a failing student. And it's got something to do with a slightly odd analogy that I call the headless chicken approach. Okay, I'm going to say that again, just in case you didn't hear me. The headless chicken approach. Now, in case you're wondering, or if you've never seen a headless chicken, yeah, a headless chicken is mad, yeah. A headless chicken, and I don't go around taking chickens' heads off, but if I had a headless chicken in this area right now and it was running around, I guess without its head, it would be bumping into walls, bumping all over the place. It would just be carnage. Now, why am I bringing up the analogy of a headless chicken? I'll tell you why. Because failing SBL students, when we build in this whole area of professional marks, more often than not, God bless them, and with respect to them, when they're in the exam, they operate like a headless chicken. They operate when they're looking at all those exhibits, 6 of them or thereabouts, 15 pages of information, 3, 4, or 5 requirements. They're running around like a headless chicken. And indeed, those professional marks go out the window. The key to passing SBL is a system. I'll say that again. The key to passing SBL is a system. There's the exhibits up top. Here's the requirements. The system needs to enable you to find the exhibits quickly. If you look at any requirement, any question in the SBL paper since September 18, what are you going to find out? You're going to find out that more often than not, each individual requirement relates to 1, maximum 2 exhibits. So the system, which we'll be using here at Viva, yeah, allows you to find those exhibits quickly. Okay, so I'm going to move on because this webinar isn't about the SBL. SBL first, get confidence, use a system, pass it, and then attack the options papers. So in terms of the changes taking effect, I've sort of already dealt with this point. We know they're already in effect. Some students have had murders, some students have passed, some students are worried about ATX in June. More of that in a moment. So this is the deal. So after June, by the September sitting 2023, everything's going to be in play. And we also know that SBL is going to change slightly as well with a new pre-scene, but that's not really going to affect the professional skills marks. Now, let's go on to something that's very, very important. Why? Now, this part of Plan A is crucial, and it also links into our Plan C. But let's focus here. Why are we facing these changes? Now, I touched on it up top. There's 5 key points here, yeah? According to the ACCA, the introduction of these professional skills is going to make you better financial professionals. Next point. We're talking about a broad, holistic approach across the options papers that will test you thoroughly, not just on the content side, but really you're going to have to display skills to be able to get professional marks. And you're going to have to get those professional marks to be able to pass the exam, more than likely. In other words, we can't do what some students are planning to do, which is ignore professional skills and just go for 50 out of 80. It's not going to work. The mathematics don't work. They do not work. Next point, employability. Employers want people with better skills. This is what they're telling us. So the ACCA, yeah, have to change the qualification. They've got no choice. Outside of that, they need to stay relevant. They want to stay relevant. They've got to listen to the people that employ ACCA qualified accountants. And indeed, they've got to make sure that they need or they meet the needs of the profession broadly. Okay, so that's why. In other words, everything that we're doing, everything that has happened, including the introduction of the SBL paper in September 18, is down to employers. That's interesting, isn't it? Because we're talking about real life. And this is important, everybody. One mind shift that I think that you need to consider is not that, oh, there's some professional skills. I need to deal with this new challenge. And it's all about just doing an exam with skills in it. I think that what we've got to be doing is we've got to be looking beyond the ACCA qualification. You've got to be asking yourself, what level of skills do you have in the workplace? Where are you lacking? What's important? This whole skills area isn't just about you passing an options paper. It's about your career going forward. Because look at the information that we've been given. Employers want better skills with their employees. It's as simple as that. Let's start thinking about that day by day, week by week. Let's move on. Now, in terms of the professional skills, you'll be familiar with them if you've sat, let's say, an options paper already, or perhaps if you've sat the SBL paper. We know what the skills are, okay? It's a question of, can we display them, yeah? As I've said there in the pop-up box, broadly based on the SBL, but just slightly different. We've got communication, analysis and evaluation, skepticism, judgment for the AAA side, and indeed commercial acumen. So they sound quite straightforward, yeah? What about going a little bit more depth? What about the nitty-gritty? Now, what I've done here in this part of the mind map, remember, you can get a download of this mind map. What I've done here is just consider one or two areas based on information that's been published by the ACCA. I've called it the nitty-gritty. So let me show you what I mean. They talk about communication, yeah? Now, if it was me, if I was an ACCA student and I was preparing for an options paper, and I'm studying and I see a question that requires me to show communication skills, what I would be doing is literally drilling down into the nitty-gritty. So rather than smoke and fire coming off my keyboard and launching in, diving in, I say, hold on a minute. What does this mean? What do they mean by persuade? What do they mean by perform? Get down and dirty. So a definition, persuade, make somebody do something by giving them good reasons for doing it. So we're talking about an argument for the marker, for the examiner, based on the information, the scenario that you see. Drill down when you're doing questions and make sure that the focus of your studies, when you're studying for AFM, AAA, ATX, make sure that the focus, the main core of your study is doing, not reading about skills, yeah? Not worrying about skills, is trying to display skills. In other words, plan and carefully write out answers. And if there's a failing of students of picking up new techniques and picking up new skills, is that they don't spend enough time trying to, in other words, trying to get better, for example, at persuading, or perhaps generally at communicating. Next one here, analysis and evaluation. Again, I've just picked one of the four, investigate, carefully examine the facts of the situation. You have to understand these verbs and indeed these phrases, verbs, to be able to answer the question. Absolutely. Next one, skepticism. When we think of assess, it's about judgment. It's about nature or quality of somebody, or more likely something. Commercial acumen. This is often one that causes students bother because they think that they need to have some sort of, business experience or experience of running a business or being involved in running a business to be able to have commercial acumen? I don't think so. Not at all. I think commercial acumen is about common sense. When we think about demonstrate, we're talking proof or evidence or providing proof or evidence. So really, based on what you see, and I've just taken one or two examples, you'll see that most of the verbs that are going to be used are reasonably straightforward. What you've got to be able to do when you see questions, when you see requirements, is immediately recall definitions, plan carefully, and practice, practice, practice. Okay? Now, key takeaways. What have we got so far? What have we seen? Well, I've kept it fairly straightforward. We know why we're having to deal with this. Basically, employers and consultations between the ACCA and employers. They've got no choice. The ACCA have got no choice but to have updated this qualification in the last few months, because otherwise this qualification becomes less relevant. So it's the employers that are driving it, your employers. Outside of that, some key points. Recording will be available. I would say your first thing to do is something that I mentioned in relation to the SBL. Think about the order of your papers and, choose your easier battles first. And for me, I do think that the SBL paper is probably the easiest battle. You may think differently, maybe you've had difficulties with it, but with the right technique, and practice, I think that paper is very, very passable. The next point, there's a lot of information. Maybe you've seen it, maybe you haven't, on the ACCA side. The ACCA have published a lot of information. I read everything, and it's very, very good. Let's do our research outside of attending Viva Tuition webinars. Let's research. Let's read everything that's out there. Final point, this is an interesting one. The Ethics and Professional Skills module. Now, you may be aware that according to the ACCA, where students sit this module before they sit any papers at the strategic professional level, their chances of passing goes up by 25%. I'll say that again in case you didn't hear me. The ACCA have told us that where students sit the ethics and professional skills module, there's a 25% hike in their chances of passing. That's something to consider, okay? I'm not saying you have to or you should do. I'm just telling you what the ACCA have told us, okay? Now, let's move on to thinking outside the box. Now, you remember at the beginning of this webinar, I said, plan A, plan B, plan C. Plan A, we've sort of dealt with. We know what we need to do, We need to do some research, watch the recording, and basically understand why we're having to deal with this. It's broadly down to employers. Now, if I said to you that plan B was about the box or indeed thinking outside it, what I mean by that is this. It's really based on a question as such. My plan B is based on this particular question. In other words, the key to success in ACCA exams. Now, let me give you an analogy. Now, this is going to turn everything that we've said today on its head. Everything gets turned on its head with plan B. Plan B is nearly the opposite of plan A. Plan A is straightforward. Okay, there's skills. What are they? Let's practice. We know why they're happening. Practice, practice, practice. Now, this area here reminds me of going back, believe it or not, a very, very long time ago and linking something that happened in 1999 to what's happening now in the ACCA qualification. Now, what I mean by that is this. When I listen to students, lecturers, tutors, when I, look online at this whole area, when I watch videos from other tuition providers, I see a lot of stress, anxiety, worry about, what's going to happen. These option papers are going to be so difficult to pass. The pass marks are going to change dramatically. Everyone's going to fail and on and on and on and on. I see a lot of worry, concern, and maybe a little bit of scaremongering. In other words, people out to scare other people, whether they're students or tutors. And let me take you back to something that may stick with you, a little bit of an odd story, but I remember going back to 1999. In fact, December 1999. Yes, I'm that old. I know that most of you, if not all of you, are probably not. Maybe you don't remember the details of the millennium. And indeed, the shift from December 1999 to January 2000. In other words, the new century. And the reason that I mention this, you may be sitting there wherever you are in the world thinking, what is he talking about? This is important. And I really do hope this sticks with you, because this is quite unusual. What I remember is this, is that as an accountant in public practice in London, as I was working in London, running my own business, I remember that everyone, including many, many IT consultancies, were telling us all, everyone who was in business, that once the clock struck 12, yeah, in other words, once the new millennium hit, yeah, 12 o'clock midnight, December 31st, in 1999, that basically we're all in trouble. In other words, computers were going to stop, clocks were going to stop. And a lot of these consultants were sort of making quite a lot of money, checking systems, putting things in place to make sure that once we went over into the new century, that your PC wouldn't blow up, and your phone, and basically your house. So there was a lot of what I would call scaremongering that went on in December, and indeed all throughout 1999, about at the end of this year, when this change takes place, if you don't pay us a £5,000 fee, then your business is probably going to stop, because all your computers are going to blow up. That's what they were telling us. Now, I can tell you that what actually happened come the millennium is basically nothing. Everything was fine, absolutely fine. Now, you may be thinking, what are you talking about? Well, do you know what? I think that everything is going to be fine. In other words, I think there's another approach. Rather than us thinking that this is some sort of insurmountable challenge, rather than thinking that these professional skills, we're in trouble, I don't think we are at all. I'm talking about a different mindset here. And the answer to this question links in to what I've just said. So in other words, if I said to you, forget plan A, forget looking at this in the normal way, and think about the answer to this question, okay? The answer to this question, let me tell you, is success in exams around about subject and technical content knowledge? For me, no, it isn't. What about the number of hours of study? In other words, several hundred hours, you're bound to pass. I don't think it's about that either. What about working in a related field, finance or accounting? If you do that, is it easier to pass? I don't think it is. No, I don't think that's relevant. So what is it that is the secret of success in ACCA exams, whether or not there's professional skill marks at 20% in them or not? What's the secret? I can tell you the secret in my experience of 12 years of lecturing is as follows. Number one, good study technique. And number two, good exam technique. Now, let me bring it back to the professional skills. What I'm saying with our plan B is this. If a student studies correctly, if a student understands solid exam technique, then when they do questions, either in mock exams on the big day, they're going to score the professional skills marks. In other words, if you answer the question, you're going to score the marks. So actually, in a way, it's a little bit like going back to December 1999. Maybe one way of us thinking about this is that, in fact, it's much ado about nothing. What we've got to do with our plan B, if you accept my premise here, I'm just trying to affect the way that you think, is understand, what does study technique, excellent study technique, mean? Number two, what does excellent exam technique mean? What does it mean? Do you know? Let me give you a hint. Number one, study technique. If you want to get these professional marks, the first thing you're going to do is understand the difference between poor study and good study. Poor study involves doing lots of reading, doing lots of making notes. Good study involves doing lots of doing, failing in your preparation. In other words, as you flow through papers, as you head towards the option papers with all these professional skilled marks, all 20 of them, if you want to get them, if you want to get those professional marks, let's make sure that we're actively failing in each study session. Yeah, you heard me. I said it. I'm talking about study sessions that involve you failing questions, doing questions, not knowing what's going on, looking at the model solution, checking where you went wrong, and saying, I should have said this, or I wrote that paragraph. That's a load of rubbish. I can't do that again, etc., etc. So very briefly, this webinar isn't about study technique, but let's understand, let's do our research. What's good study technique? Second point, exam technique. If you have reasonable technical knowledge, but good exam technique, you are going to pass that ACCA exam, whether or not it's got professional skills in it or not. In other words, what does the examiner, or what's his favorite approach in questions? What's his favorite questions? What sort of buzzwords does he expect in answers? What sort of tricks does he employ? What sort of things does he not like? Let's read the exam reports, etc., etc., etc. That's what's called good exam technique. It's about knowing your enemy. So if you combine study technique and good exam technique, the professional skills are going to fall into your lap. We don't have to be worried about all this, just like I shouldn't have been worried about the clocks ticking 12 o'clock, December 31st, 1999. I remember I was worried. I was running a business. I had lots of clients. Complete waste of my time. So the bottom line is that plan B for us, and it's just a way of thinking. You can think, Paul, that's all crazy. It's got nothing to do with that. There's something else going on with these professional skills. You don't know what you're talking about. That's cool if that's the way you want to think. I just want to shift and give you an idea of maybe another way that we think. Are you studying correctly or not? Do you know your examiner? Do you know what exam technique means? Are you putting it into practice every single study session? Are you failing enough in your study sessions? If you're not, why not? Because if you don't fail in your preparation in those 6-8 weeks prior to the big day, if you don't keep failing over and over and over again, then there's a chance you're going to fail on the big day. Some of the most successful people I've ever met in my life, and I've met a lot, are the biggest failures I know. They fail, fail, fail. You've got to fail to succeed. Remember that. If you remember one thing from tonight, remember that. Fail, 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 and then succeed. That's my plan B. It's not obligatory. It's not mandatory. You may think it's a load of nonsense. Okay, but it may not be. Let's talk about our plan C, because remember, there is one. And this is also based on a question. You know, it links to something that I said when we talked about the origins of everything that we're talking about today. In other words, why are we doing this? You know, I think why we're doing it is this. And I'm going to share with you something in one moment. Several months ago, this article from Udemy that you're probably familiar with, in fact, it's an Udemy and PwC article on skills, just came across my desk. And I put the link in there for you. Now, I'm going to show you briefly. I know Hugo will want me to shift towards the Q&A, and I hope that you do have Q&As. This is our plan C, okay? I've got some work for you to do, okay? Now, let me just show you this article. Bear with me 1 second, everybody. Bear with me. Okay. Okay, so what you'll see here is a PDF that is available called Workplace Trends, okay? Now, in this particular article, what you'll see, I'm not going to read everything to you, but what you'll see here is basically reference to skills that are extremely relevant in 2023. If you look down this PDF, what you'll see is reference in particular. Let me take you to the relevant page. I've highlighted a few areas for you, but this is the area that I want you to take a quick look at. Okay, I'm hoping that you can see that okay. I think the screen share is working. Take a look at this. Okay, this is very interesting, and I'll make it a little bit bigger so that you can see it. What you're going to see here is reference to business skills and consume skills in 2023. So Udemy doesn't really get a lot better than Udemy. What we've got here is reference to what people are doing in the workplace. Now, remember, going back to my point about the origins of professional skills in the ACCA exams, what we've got to do, I think, as part of our plan C, is forget about examinations and start thinking about improving our professional skills in the workplace, if you're working right now, and even if you're not. And this article will really help you do that, because it's got a multitude of links in there, and it talks about the type of skills that are in play and that employers really, really want. In fact, it talks about the top 10, okay? So this article will be available for you. As mentioned, I think it's a good idea to take a very good look at this article and try and think of sort of reversing your thinking on this area of skills and thinking to yourself, what do I need to do week by week or month by month to improve my skills in the workplace, and then link it back to ACCA exams rather than looking at it the other way around. Okay, I hope that made sense. I think this is a great article, definitely worth looking. Okay, I'm going to go back to main screen here, and hopefully we may have some Q&A, or we may have some questions. Does anyone have any questions at all for me? And I'm happy to answer anything at all. Bear with me. We have, okay, Gideon Tabasso, your thoughts. Any questions at all based on what I've said or based on what we've covered today? Anything at all? Let me know. Did everything make sense? Did everything make sense? Yes? Any questions? No questions at all? Are we all good? Gideon and Tabata, did everything make sense to you there? Yeah, it did? Okay, cool. And in terms of plan A versus plan B versus plan C, do you feel as if you have some new ideas in relation to professional skills or not? And I'm happy to accept any answer. Do you feel you have some ideas going forward that may help you? Yeah? Did what I've said make sense? Yeah, it did. I hope it did. Okay. Okay, cool. Well, listen, what I'll do then is I'll close up. Okay, cool. Gideon, thank you for that. Thank you for that. And thank you for joining me today. Okay, what I'll do is I'll close up now. Thank you for your input. Good luck with your studies going forward. As mentioned, the mind map is available for download, so I hope you'll take a chance to sort of look through it in the comfort of your own home. Good luck with your studies going forward, and maybe I'll see you down the line in a Viva class. Okay, thank you for joining me, and catch up with you in another webinar. Cheers, everyone.